The Crips and Bloods were doing other things also at this time. Kidnapping, bullying, robbing, taking cars, taking life. Somebody stole my Stacey Adams. We on the pass. So I took a gun and shot the camp up. I had 40 arrests by the time I was 18. Melvin, born and raised in Los Angeles, California. Both my mother and father were born in little towns in Mississippi. They were looking for a better life. And my father got chased by the Ku Klux Klan, where they shot him, ran him off the road.
How did life change for you and your family when you actually kind of escaped the South?
When we moved out here, the street gangs that I seen, they first had a cause. They were fighting against police and segregation and so forth. Then when the government started knocking down Black Panthers and other organizations, it created a vacuum, and that's when the Crips and the Bloods started. It was a whole new game. Gun violence, PCP, going to jail. We getting at the most 4 years for a murder. A window from 71 to 75 where I racked up 40 arrests. Most of the juveniles had a murder by the time they were 18. We got shot at or shooting back, and I always tell people we only protected ourselves. Whereas now they do it on purpose like it's a badge of honor. These rappers, you hear them brag about killing somebody, then when they get their killed their crime. Nobody on the internet is leading no Crips. I don't give a damn who you name. You're not gonna tell nobody they would have killed you. They would have killed you. They would have killed you. People like to brag about that. So I'm not gonna sit up here and make you think it's glorious and it's a badge of honor, because that was some of the stupidest shit I ever did, to waste my life to where I hurt my mother, my father, my family, the community. It ain't nothing cool about that.
Welcome back, people. I'm here with somebody that's a legendary figure in the streets of Los Angeles. I don't think that there's anybody better alive that I could be speaking to about the early history of the Crips and the gang life in the city of Los Angeles and beyond. So I'm very excited to be sat down with Melvin today, and we're going to be getting into all of the early history about the Crips. So Melvin, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell me where you come from?
Melvin, born and raised in Los Angeles, California. Been a resident here all my life and pretty much a historian from the life I lived and changed, where I went from a tax burden to a taxpayer.
That's amazing. So I want to start right back at the start, even before you were born. So from what I understand, your parents actually migrated from the South to Los Angeles as part of sort of a period that was known as the Great Migration. Is that right?
Yes.
And what was the reasoning for your family to move from the South to California?
Well, segregation as well as social unrest. You got the Ku Klux Klan. My mother was both my mother and father were born in little towns in Mississippi, Coldwater, that area. But my dad was raised in Memphis. So I was born here in '57. We went back to the South, and my sister was born there in '60. Then we came back. My other sister, I was in fact down there when Martin Luther King was slain. So most of the, on the east side, when we moved here, which I was telling you earlier, this avenue here, Central, where we at, was the hot knob for the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, starting back with Charlie Bird, Dorothy Dandridge, great blacks, where they had to be over here on the east side. And then eventually I moved to the west side, which was another form of opening the doors for blacks, because it was mostly whites over there.
So your family kind of moved to get a better life. What would you say kind of was the biggest difference once your family did, fully move to California? I know that kind of originally you stayed on the east side. How did life change for you and your family when you actually, finally had made that move and kind of escaped the South? Did things get immediately better, or did you begin dealing with different problems of the same sort?
Well, when we moved out here, I've always seen gangs starting in elementary. We stayed in some apartments right behind this continuation all-boys school, which was for delinquents back then in the '60s, called California High. and what was the other name it used to call it? But it ended up being Bethune. Reese, all boys school, California High. Then it's now a junior high. But I used to see the gangs of the 60s, the Slauson's, Businessman, Manchester Park Boys and stuff like this, South Park and stuff like this. They'll fight every day in the alley, take their shoes off, short skin, slacks, knitted shirts, Stacey Adams shoes, and they do rags, and they fight every day. This how the gangs were then. And then that was on the east side. My mama was working at a taco stand, probably making $1 an hour. And then, because my mother had me at 14 or 15. Now when we moved from the east side, that's south of the east of the 110, and we moved to the west side. Now it's integrated, and the things changed. You got giant slide, you got swimming pools, you got indoor basketball courts, you got theaters, you got fresh produce, fish markets, go-kart, miniature golf, the farm, sports arena. You have Hollywood, you got Beverly Hills, you got the airport, you got Ladera Heights, you got black actors, you got everything that's happening now. And then they started busing us. So you could see Tookie at one end of the park and whites and Jews playing croquet at the other end of the park during this time. So that was a big difference. And also, wasn't no truancy. You had to be on campus. So a lot of stuff went on in them days on the campuses, because they'd take you to jail. And doing back then, you couldn't be housed in a substation as a juvenile. And that's another thing we'll talk about, is the effects and the laws that were created from the behavior back then that affect them now. They get punished. We got to tap on the wrist.
Absolutely, I want to hear more about that. So you just mentioned about, during your early time on the east side, the gangs that were already operating in the area, the Slausons, the businessmen. I'd love to know how these organizations kind of differed from the Crips that came later. Were there differences? Were these organizations a little bit less organized or cohesive than what came later? Can you maybe explain to me what that was like?
Well, from what I've seen, they were they were rebelling against the police. And a lot of them were not only a gang, because people need to know the difference between a street gang and an organized crime. A street gang, which is basically Crips, Mexican Mafia, and Hell's Angels, the other two get held to a higher standard and go to federal court because of their structure and organization, whereas a street gang for us is 14 to 24, and the difference, long as it's 3 or more, you can be considered a street gang. But what separates them is the criminal element. So the street gangs that I've seen, which that term didn't start, they were first had a cause. They were fighting against police and segregation and so forth. But they also, I seen them, they had cars, 2 parents, no guns did I ever see or even think they would think about maybe a knife. But usually they were fighting. That's what usually was going on. They were fighting. And it wasn't no status to be one or nothing like that. I'm seeing it from the first grade all the way up till today. Then when the government and other infighting started knocking down and changing internally, the Black Panthers and other organizations like that, going to prison and so forth, it created a vacuum starting in about 71, the end of 70, and that's when the Crips and the Blood started without the term blood. They just were Crips, and everything else was Van Ness, Boy, Pyru, so that term hadn't even started. But the difference is it was a whole new game. Gun violence, PCP, going to jail. The cell doors didn't close on us. They didn't have no laws like back then. We getting at the most 4 years for a murder. There was no term, gang enhancements. There was no being tried as a juvenile. There was no such thing as home invasion. You get caught with a gun, they give it back. There was no such thing as carjacking, no 10-20 gun laws. We were in an era, a window from 71 to 75 where I racked up 40 arrests. Most of the juveniles either had a murder by the time they were 18. And the third criteria, if they still living from back then, most of them have done over 35, 25 years or better. So the game changed in the 70s. Now, if you want to go to the 80s, every 10 years, the game changed again. Now you got drug dealers coming into the game, traveling to other states, and now the Crips are starting to go to where the gang banging come along with the drug dealing. That brought in the difference in weapons. The Uzi started coming.
Yeah.
So every 10 years, things start changing all the way up to now. You got 5 generations, but the one consistent is the sisters gun violence. You got them in my area where we didn't get jumped in. We got shot at or shooting back, and I always tell people we only protected ourselves. And we were naive.
Yeah.
Whereas now they do it on purpose like it's a badge of honor, and then they think they generations from here on in is what it's been about in our generation. That don't go like that.
So when the Crips came to be, what actually happened to the gangs that were already existing in the area? Groups like the Slausons and the Businessmen, did they get absorbed into the Crips? Did they kind of fall away? Did they get busted? What happened to those groups? And then once the Crips were kind of solidified, you know, what kind of happened in the streets once that became a thing?
Well, a lot of them were over 18, and they didn't want to be mixed in with no killing. The things that the Crips and Bloods were doing when they first come was more violent. Not so much, I'm gonna say more violent and extreme, to where they were doing not just like them fighting, going to clubs, fighting police, socially active and things. The Crips and Bloods were doing other things also at this time: kidnapping, bullying, robbing, taking cars, taking life. So they wouldn't have lasted a day getting caught for something like this. So most of them, if they hadn't went to prison, probably most of them went and stayed pro-black, got jobs, and faded on, not away. They still were around. But starting 71, 72, the game changed. And it's turned to where they were usually between the ages of 14 to 17. You could get away. They hadn't changed the laws. It was still rehabilitation. Carjacking, which you get a life sentence for now. Back then, it was GTA. I had 40 arrests by the time I was 18. That was 1975. 14 to 18, 71 to 75. From no arrest. The first night I went to jail, I cried.
Really?
And I was getting out in the morning. Cried all night reading the Archie comic book, but I was right back in jail 2 or 3 days later and haven't quit or been out the system since. Started that odyssey. And so that was the difference when they started in 71, 72, and it left a vacuum for these youth, particularly on the west side. You only had the west side, which was Tookie. The east side, which was Raymond Washington, the Watts, Compton area, Mac Thomas, and Compton, Lil James. These were the faces. But all of them, and 1, 2, 3, all of them dead. That's another thing. At the end of the day, A lot of them died. A lot of them end up in the penitentiary, and some of them are successful. But the majority of the guys, they on their side of town. Like I say, the west side, we never had a loss unless it was internally for the first 2 years. Then, when they started Crip on Crip, later on in the 80s, that's when the Crip casualties started really rising. Other than that, it was strictly blood versus Crip. So at the end of the day, they couldn't do what we were doing. They wouldn't last so long, and they didn't want no part of it, what was going on, because it was just, they didn't want no part of us doing what we were doing. Like I say, in fact, the first murder was the Robert Ballou murder, whose father was the equivalent of Johnny Cochran. He was an attorney, a black attorney, Robert Ballou Sr. His son got beat over a leather coat. That was in March. That was the first time the Crips ever had been heard publicly. They had been underground and in the high schools and on the streets for a couple of years, but publicly, on a local level, state level, that was the first. Then the next murder happened, that was March. I'm 14, then when I turned 15, June, the mayor of Inglewood, that's Butts, who you see do the Super Bowl with Snoop, his brother get killed. Douglas Green, where at 15, tried to help him, and he ended up getting killed at a house party, and that was the start of numerous times during my life I've had to witness homicides or discussions.
I've heard you talk before about that kind of murder at the Palladium being one of the first times that the public heard the term Crips, one of the first high-profile murders that was kind of reported on, involved with the gangs. That wasn't the first murder that the Crips had done, but was that the first time that the Crips, being involved in homicide
No,
had
that was
reached the mainstream?
about the first murder that was linked. You'll hear other stories, oh, somebody had this on or had that on it. No, that was about the first one that was attributed, that you can actually attribute to the Crips and Bloods. That's one of the earliest ones and one of the most famous ones. Then after that, Tookie's sidekick, Buddha, got killed. You had Odie, you had a lot of them that died in 72, starting in 72, up till today. So there was no killing. The killing started, anybody that was there, they're gonna tell you pretty much 1972.
From a lot of my research, it seems like a lot of violence took place over leather jackets. There was a big thing of people stealing leather jackets from each other.
Not stealing, taking them. You could get killed over a leather jacket.
Really?
You could get killed for stepping on somebody, boots. You could get killed for having a perm, where you're getting your pimping mixed up with your cripping. You could get killed a lot of ways. And it wasn't like, I don't want to say it like, people like to brag about that. But like I say, it's no more different when they were fighting over Jordan, no more different than them doing these beefs and raps. It's at the end of the day, it's still somebody's life to get taken. So let's not stereotype one area to where it's still murder.
Yeah.
This just in this area here, yeah, you could get it. And a lot of things, rappers, actors, entertainers, it just then went on and on as they got older. They started, that's what this was about. So yeah, you could get killed. I've seen a lot of them get killed. One guy, because he had on the brim, that's when I was 15. Another one in later on, the colors come in, the Converse, tennis shoes. There's a lot of things. Crip walking could get you killed. There's a lot of things that were going on during the years that end up being trademarks or stood the test of time. but it's really not nothing to be trying to shine or brag about.
Definitely. So another thing I wanted to ask you about, during the 60s and 70s, from what I understand, there was a lot of racial tension in Los Angeles. You know, the Watts riots, you know, a very famous instance of where kind of racial tensions really got deadly and really got very serious. What was your experience, you know, once you'd moved to California, as far as the white communities and the black communities interacting with each other, and as the gangs kind of increased their influence in the area? Was it completely segregated at that time? Were there white people in the community? Were they, did Crips
on the west side? They were white. Don't forget, you got the West Side Crips, you got Compton Crips, you got Watts, and you got the East Side. In fact, Marv, Ayatollah probably mentioned that Compton used to be white, so he's old enough to win. On the East Side, when I was seeing the gangs, which was when I was all the way from elementary to the 8th grade until I moved to the West Side, it was pretty much Hispanic and black. And it's always been a problem there. See, every race has an organization that will kill you. A black because of the color of the skin. Blacks only kill blacks because of the areas that they stay in, they closest. But when I moved to the west side, like I say, first, there was no projects on everything is homes, houses. Most of the children, families over there were mothers and fathers. The marriage rate, unmarried rate was only 5%. Most of them were having kids when they were married, as opposed to now. And you get that, our generation mixed up. We had to sneak out the window. We didn't jump off no porch. We had to sneak out the window so our parents wouldn't see what we was doing. Push their car out in neutral and started up to steal it. And we never brought nothing we did into the other side. Nobody I did knew that would do something like that. So once we moved to the west side, like I told you earlier, at St. Andrews Park, that's where almost 80% of the Crips meetings at the beginning would be at St. Andrews Park, and the other 20% gonna be at Sportsman's Park, both of them on the west side. And that's where they started. That started congregating at the end of 71, 72. That's when it was West Side Crips, East Side Crips, Compton Watts, but you also had the Inglewood Crips, which was aligned with the West Side, as well as Venice Shoreline, which was Venice. They also were part of that, to where the West Side we stretched. So you could have Tookie, Raymond Washington, and all of them, hundreds of them down at this end of the park. And at the other end of the park, they had a croquet. You'll see the whites playing croquet. You could go into, which is a gym now. Back then, it was a theater. They had plays, Halloween, giant slides, rockets, and stuff like that. In fact, when we mentioned the Ballou murder, all of them that were involved and got convicted come from this area. They arrested quite a few of them at this park where they jumped off the roof. They used to have a section where you play caroms, golf, and all that, ping pong for the whites. And the ones that was involved, Judson Baycott, Robert Ballou, who was the victim, Sam Cunningham, Ricardo Sims, those were some of the first guys ever convicted for murder when it came to gangs. They are the first ones ever convicted for that. So then we started getting bused to school. I was the #1 basketball player, one of them at 14, 15, 16. Now I'm going to Hollywood High, to where it take us almost 3 hours to get there. They started busing them to the valleys and stuff like that. Then I got caught with a gun on campus, and I went to where we ended up getting bused over here on the east side, in an area where they were killing blacks back then. They had to basically protect us on a private bus till we made it back over here. So the schools was racist. One time I was going with Ray Charles and them kid. I got them gang banging at 15. Tina Turner, they going to a school, all little white school called Westchester, and then you went to it. It was in I forget it right now. It'll come back. But anyway, all white school. And the blacks were parents were stars, Ray Charles, Ike and Tina Turner, Mark Kopage that played Julia's son in there. And so my first day of school, they lagging all whites. They lagging quarters on handball court. And a white boy come by and swept all the quarters up and robbed them, took the quarters. Wow. They went right in there and told them, I took it. First day of school. I got kicked out of school.
Wow. So they framed you from the start?
Yeah, but the thing of it is, I was black.
So they would never believe you?
My mama didn't even believe me.
Really?
Thought I was lying. Then I was playing basketball at Hollywood High. And me and my man Kevin Goff, I done walked on, I already done got sent to Hollywood High where I was in jail in camp and shot a camp up behind stealing my biscuits. Somebody stole my Stacey Adams, we on a pass. So I took a gun and shot the camp up. Wow. And we got caught, me and my partner, because we fell in poison ivy. And the next day we had poison ivy. They say that was y'all did it. Now I'm at Hollywood High. I walked right on with, they just was starting to come out with colored Converse. Back in the day, they used to only be black and white. Now they starting to make color. And so now they say, we're gonna send you here to go play basketball. They just kicked me out the camp. In fact, I had the gun on me in my luggage when I left, and they put me in. And I ended up going to Hollywood High, and a Mexican girl kissed me after the game. And me and my man go in the cafeteria, and the Mexican said, if they called us, mayate is the word, nigga, if y'all come in the cafeteria, in fact, don't come. Back then, we carrying canes and all this. We 15. We went in that cafeteria, and that's how I ended up getting kicked off the team. We go to jail for attempted murder with the cane. Oh, we beat them up. Wow. The whole cafeteria, we fought them all. And so these are the type of things we were going through early. I went to 17 high schools.
Wow. So something I wanted to ask you about, obviously you were talking about how you were kind of, essentially discriminated against and mistreated by the white people at school. Is it true that there were actually kind of racist white gangs operating on the West Side during this time? I heard about a group called is it the Spook Hunters that were active? So this was sort of another sort of very dangerous
They
group
were a gang that were basically like Ku Klux Klan, from what I gathered, that were looking for blacks. And I done heard plenty of stories about them. And then later on in life, you had the Guardian Angels came out here from New York, the Gun Ho, and then 3 or 4 of them got killed by Crips. Then they went from being in the inner city to where they started taking their ass up to Beverly Hills where the hobos wear suits. So a lot of times that didn't work. But yeah, they had the Spook Hunters, and probably I told Marv would be the one to really give you an in-depth thing about that.
Sounds good. So obviously at a certain point, you meet Raymond and Tukey. You guys kind of establish yourselves in all these different areas. Can you tell me a little bit about how you first met those individuals and kind of how that relationship flourished to be such a kind of important meeting of very important people in this area?
I knew Tukey's 4 years older. Him and Raymond, they born in 53. I'm born in 57, so I'm 14, they 18. That's why you'll never see them really getting in no trouble. But I knew Tukey since the 8th grade because his sister named Bridget I knew before Tukey. And I was walking Bridget home, and Tookie was in the front yard. That's how I knew Tookie. Then he stayed on up the road. Now Raymond Washington I met when they started to formulate, because people didn't know Tookie and Raymond Washington didn't know each other. This wasn't no planned, nothing, none of this stuff was planned.
Yeah.
All of it spontaneous. But Raymond and them had came over from the east side and got into a fight at a record hop, the Boston Cross record hop at Sportsman Park. In fact, the people who got into it are the same ones that end up getting the murder at the Palladium.
Right.
Them is, so when they all got into a fight, Tookie was in doing time, in fact, the Brookings. And they had to tell them, they wanted to know who them dudes off the west side that could fight like that. And so they wanted to have a meeting. This is in about the end of '71, right up around in there. And then they told them, you gotta wait on Tookie to come out. He was coming out on weekend passes. That's how him and Raymond knew. But I knew Tookie, Vicky, his sisters, and everything else from back then. And he had St. Andrews Park. Now when it came to Raymond, I met Raymond in about 71, 72 at 14, about 14 going on 15, from when we started to merge, and you got the older ones, 18 at the most, maybe 20, no matter where you at, the max probably 20. And you got the younger ones, these are the gunners, the 14s, the 15, the 16, the 17-year-olds. And that was the age group. And then we might be, say at the Wasp Festival, we on the east side. And that's how we started meeting, because we were unified. We wasn't uniformity. The Crips, we were all as one, not now where you see internal fighting and Crip on Crip stories. You won't hear our stories about Crip on Crip. It's gonna be strictly Crip versus Bloods, and not only that, polices, and anybody else. It wasn't just like it is singular now. We were our own organization. Couldn't nobody tell us nothing. It went from there, and we didn't bang long. It ain't like you 40, 50, 60 years old talking about I'm a Crip right now.
Yeah.
That's some lame shit.
Yeah.
But it make us look lame. But don't think we don't do what you do if we still in this environment. And a lot of times we give these kids slack, and they give us some too, but now they get a little disrespectful, but we know your grandmama, your mama, your daddy, and we probably knew you when you were born. So we back up a little bit. But if you press us, you don't want it. You really don't. You really don't. Because that showing guns and threatening, why you gotta do that? And why should I be subject to it? But I've been arrested 60 times on that police report, and I ain't never been a victim or a witness. And we don't talk about the era. There ain't nothing to talk about. But they sure would try to make something like, we made you do what we did. No, you ain't. You got more graduation pictures than mug shots. So you ain't even paid your dues to even talk about this. You rap about it, you dance and prance, but none of y'all doing or stuck like this. So I just don't like how social media allows them to depict themselves. No other race does what the blacks do for attention, slander, talking down on each other, but let's talk about what they doing to serve the community. A lot of them ain't doing nothing but just running their mouth, creating situations that getting people hurt. The elderly, the kids, they need to flip the game, man.
It seems that the attitudes have changed a lot from generation to generation. Something I'd be curious to know is, when you were running around with Raymond and Tukey, was there a kind of certain degree of kind of principles that you guys wanted to project with the Crips? I know kind of Italian-American gangs and organizations, they always had these codes of honor and these organizational structures. A lot of the Chicago gangs, like the Black Disciples, were very structured in the 60s and 70s. How much did the Crips, as you guys founded them, have much of an organizational structure, discipline, culture, or at the start was it a little bit more loosely organized?
We were all for one, it was the structure. No matter how you call it, we had rules. Don't forget, we only 14 to 20, but really 14 up under. Those are the ones. You got gang members and you got gang bangers. Gang member is somebody that can say, oh, I'm a Crip. But I don't do what Crips do. But I'm a Crip. I understand it. I'm a sympathizer is what you call it. Then you got the candlestick murkers, the killers, the gang bangers. But you have to remember, it wasn't where Tukey, I never seen Tukey with a gun. I never seen Raymond Washington with a gun. They were fighters. They were, you could see fights all day also. You could see fights. So we were organized. We were all for one, one for all. And we didn't have, we had the structure. We just didn't have the mindset to where we should have been doing something positive as opposed to doing something negative. All the things, and quite a few of us are. I say 8 out of 9, 9 out of 10. Most of them were athletes. Most of us were athletes. Baseball, basketball, football, and smart. And smart. But we didn't have nobody to tell us this was wrong. We're going in and out of revolving door. Our parents don't know what we doing. They don't know what to do. And then by the time they caught on, it was too late. We didn't let our parents know what we did. And we did a lot of robbing. I did. Ice cream trucks to armored trucks. I've never been arrested for a black on black crime. Violent, attempted murders, none of that. I've been arrested about 50 times for robbery. That's what I do all my life until I just started working because my mother said, before I die, I want to be able to tell somebody my son went to work. So I've been out 9 years behind that.
Wow. So obviously in 1979, Raymond Washington loses his life. I've heard you say in other interviews that you were actually with him, just
right before that.
Yeah. So could you tell me a bit about how, not necessarily just about how he came to pass away, but kind of maybe what were some of the things that were going on in the Crips in the years kind of leading up to that? Was it
when he got out, you have to remember, Raymond didn't get the breaks in the juvenile system that Tukey did. Tukey, Warlock, Melvin Hardy, let me name them also. Melvin Hardy, Warlock, Tukey, James Miller, Dennis Johnson, Babyface, Perry Manuel, Rodney Buckner. These are all guys, Hawk, all of these guys are founders of the sets. And Raymond didn't get, like a lot of people didn't know, after Tukey got out in '72, Tukey was working for Juvenile Hall. And he had 3 halfway houses in Compton in '72. So Tukey was working with the youths and ran 3 boys home, whereas when Raymond got in trouble, Raymond got sent to prison at 18 for robberies and stuff, and Raymond ended up leaving in about '72, '73 during the pivotal year. So Raymond wasn't there and didn't get out till 1970, about 76, 77, so the game don't change. Now, when Raymond get out, he's introduced to all the sets and other people through a boy named One-Eye Clint. One-Eye Clint, Bulldog, Sugar Bear, all us, Tookie, but Tookie's in Compton now. We're still on the west side, and we right on the borderline. So now Raymond hanging with me and us, and we robbing and doing this, where at the same time Tookie's staying in Compton. So that's why the west side broke up. Tookie moved in '72, like I say. '72 was the end of the year for the west side. '71, '72, a brief period. Then the gangster Crip, rolling 60s, Avalon, east side, west side, and so forth, east coast, and what you see now, that's when that started. So also during that era, Tookie got shot in Compton by the Pyrus in about 74, about 74, 75. But either way it go, when he got shot, he called me and Rusty. And this was after he had the Continental. So this about 74, 75. And we had to do something to rectify that situation to make sure it didn't happen again. So we get the call on that. So Raymond was different. Tookie, at the beginning, he was in the weightlifting, didn't smoke, didn't do none of that stuff. Bodybuilder, cool, was going to school. They used to go to school every day, all the time. Him and his right-hand man, Buddha, and his other partner named Erskine Jones. So Tookie's downfall was later on in life. He started messing with drugs, and that took him down, because Tookie never went back to jail after 1972 until he got arrested in 1979 around February or March. And then Raymond get killed August, and they also had another murder of a guy that they don't talk about named Bloodstone, Melvin Calloway. He was killed, and that was a crucial year in the changing of the guards. Remember the 10-year watermark, 71, now it's close to 79, 80 later on, and that's when Tookie get arrested, then Raymond get killed, and also we're getting at the age to where we're starting to get sent to prison for longer stretches. So a lot of these guys early in life that had a murder, they end up thinking they could do the same thing at 18, and end up, a lot of them are just now starting to get out from 40, 50, 45, 35 years ago. And I had robbed 3 jewelry stores during that time period. And right before Raymond got killed, I had went by there to see him, put some money in his pocket then. In fact, the FBI busted us, I think, the day before he got killed, or maybe later on, but right then, the same day he got killed, which was about August the 9th or the 8th, the FBI busted me right after that also.
So what's interesting about Tookie is, I understand there was an informant that I believe you warned him about. Is that correct? And he'd kind of gotten more into the drug game. That was, I believe, at the end of the 70s. Moving into the 80s, then you start to see the rise of crack cocaine. So at what point did kind of drugs become a bigger part of the kind of, you know, the business on the streets, so to speak?
Well, you got to remember, in the early part, cocaine was a status drug. People look at it as a criminalized and that, but before blacks started getting money, you had Disco 2000, you had the Bee Gees, Love to Love You Baby, when it was fashionable to smoke, snort cocaine, had your chain, your smooth spoon and everything. But I had a friend that married a girl, met her at 17. His name was Michael Jordan. He was a Van Ness boy, which would be a blood nowadays, a Van Ness boy. And he met a girl named Rhonda Reese. We in high school, 17 years old. Rhonda Reese was the daughter of a kingpin on the level of Nicky Barnes, Haitian Jack, Freeway Rick, or anybody. He bigger than them.
Yeah.
This was her daddy. This was her daddy, Tootie Reese. Her name was Rhonda. And one day he went from khakis to slacks and driving a brand new Cadillac, Mercedes-Benz. And back then the keys were $55,000 a key, 78,000 for a hair run. We only 17. This my boy. I went to our junior high with him, so we cool. He was in the game before any drug dealer you can name that's glorified, from the Big Meech, Freeway Rick, Harriet, Pats, any of them, the ones off the east of Raymond. He was around the biggest of the big. Then you had the Love You era, 74, the disco era. Then 77, they started ether basing, the purest way. But it still was a status drug, dollar for dollar. Then come the start of the early 80s. Now they blowing the dope up. The blacks are starting to be able to get money in the inner cities. They're starting to let them sell the dope. You're getting it from the cartels. You're getting it from other things. And then the weapons started changing. Now you got drug dealers claiming gangs. But you also got the California hookup where they're starting to branch to other states. And it really wasn't the gang banging that started moving where they, oh, I'm a gang banger, I'm gonna be that. Really, that came along with having a plug to get the drugs. That came along with it, because usually it was somebody's street and you affiliated. And then they started opening up shop, because you buying a key of dope here in 77, it depends, 20,000. Out there you're getting 48, 50,000. Started in Colorado. That's where the first place they started migrating, and then they started going to all the other countries. So that's how the cocaine, and now you're starting to get the gang benders where they're starting to come in for things other than gang banging, rapping. Now we all in the same gang where they're using the Crips and the Bloods images to portray a image and depiction. This is now we starting where I'm getting into the hip hop game with Michael Conception, the last man standing, and the biggest one in hip hop. Nobody's bigger than Michael Conception in this game on the West Coast. He the last one standing, particularly since Diddy done went down. We've been in the game since, we talking Charlie Wilson in the 70s when they were doing what they was doing, New Edition, Bobby Brown, Whitney Houston, Ice-T, MC Hammer. That's another area. But I didn't like the sexual natures of what I was seeing occur. That's why I fell out of it. And my man, big in the game. So all these things was going on right then, man.
Something I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned already in the interview, you know, you've been to jail, prison, you know, dozens of times with the activities that you've been involved in. You know, I'd love to know about your first experiences going to prison and how...
To prison?
There's a big difference between jail and prison, I understand, right?
Big difference in California. We're segregated. We're the only state where you can't have, you're not gonna have a Latino in a cell with a black, a white in a cell with a black. You're not gonna have a Latino in a cell with a white. It's strictly, everything is racial. Selling, eating, weight pile, where you sit, everything is segregated. So when I first started in juvenile hall, first time I went to jail, they gave me an Archie comic book, threw me in a room with a mattress, told me I was getting out in the morning, no light, no nothing. And I had that Archie comic book and I was crying and reading. I wanted my mama. But I was getting out. My mama came and got me, and the next day I was back in there probably 2 or 3 days later, and I never quit going after that. Because they believed in rehabilitation. We just go in there, Your mama was your bail bondsman. And then I remember early in the game, my mama was crying, and I told her, you do the crime. This one, she'll tell you. I told her early, you do the crime, you do the time. And it was simple as that. But now when we started going to prison, that's a whole different ball game, because now the prisons, they've been waiting on Crips. Crips. Because they look at it as the Bloods fighting Crips, so they cool with them. See how this goes? So the game flipped, and now when we go to prison, you got the Mexican Mafia, you got the UBN that's fit to start, you got the Bloods, you got the BGFs, you got the Muslim, Sunni, Unorthodox, you got the police, you got the Black Panthers, you got the Aryan Brotherhood, and you really got the police. All of them against the Crips. So we had it where San Quentin, they got them where you in segregation, and you might have your hands, everything you do, you go in handcuff, and then the police will put you in the cell, but they don't let a Mexican up under the cell that's hiding up under your bunk, so when they close the gate, your hands tied. And they kill you. In fact, they killed a friend of mine, Louis Montgomery. So then the prison, we went and had to fight about 19, I started going 79 to prison. We fought about 18, 20 years to establish our position in prison. Because when Raymond Washington and those that were older there, it wasn't that many of them. And they were 18, 19, 20. And they wasn't a big group. But we were juveniles. But when they started going after 76, 77, when they started turning 18, that's when the prisons, they were waiting on them. They would tell you, tuck your rag.
Really?
And they out there, you talking right after George Jackson them, they got a graveyard up in there.
Really?
We young. We been in juvenile hall, now we going around, you talking, and end up, I'm in there with Charles Manson, Sirhan, the Hillside Strangler, the Southside Slayer, you name them.
Really?
I done seen all the infamous killers doing this. So whatever. So it ain't just about the gangs in my life. I've been around an extraordinary amount of people, infamous, famous, or infamous. So that prison, at the end of the day, you think you're only hurting yourself, but then you reflect back, dang, I could have been with my mama, my sister, but I'm in here behind doing something where we running as men, but that's in hindsight. As you get older, the number one deterrent is age and wisdom. So it ain't for us. We can tell you the path we've been down, but it's up to the youth to make the decisions on what you gonna do to better your life. If you thinking this the way you wanna live, to where you go and be told when to shower, when to wash your ass, when to eat, and you think your ass and you think it's cute, all that was fine at an early, but when you at this age, I wouldn't want to see nobody go and do that. And it really begs the question, who has more rights in America, a black man or an animal? I know I see a lot of them get killed by friend, family, foe, or even those here to protect us. But I know when I see an animal running loose, they seduce it, they throw a net over it. But I see a lot of people with mental health get killed by law enforcement. I also still do civil rights. I've done numerous cases people don't know about. Prince Jones, Howard University, Amadou Diallo, New York, Taisha Miller, Sharice Iverson, Margaret Laverne Mitchell. How many people have ever walked hand in hand with Martin Luther King, right? I have at the Million Man March. Wow. Coretta Scott King, Dorothy Hyatt. Then I hear people, I'm keeping the torch up for Dolores Tucker. That's who used to be on Tupac. I've been at the podium with Dolores Tucker. Wow. So a lot of things, our voices are overshadowed by hypotheticals. But when you sit them on this couch and tell them to talk about what they do, it ain't gonna match up. So it's good that you having this show because our voices need to be heard. And a lot of times, I learned this from the Black Panthers, the truth cannot coexist in a conversation with a lie. That's why I don't even really do too many podcasts. Yeah. But I'm gonna do that to be in competition about people that are just running their mouth, but what are you doing to give back? And you ain't lived a life, so I don't even waste my time. I do what I do.
I totally agree. You know, I feel like it's what you say, the truth can't coexist with a lie. You know, you have to be selective about where you actually, you know, communicate your information and making sure that you're kind of representing what's really true and what really happens.
And a lot of times we can't really say what we want to say because of the age. You got guys where they might be grandfathers now, and their family don't even know they passed. See how they go?
Yeah. Okay, so I know this is a question you've been asked before, and it's not necessarily something you necessarily want to answer directly, but I know there's been a lot of controversy and different opinions about where the name Crips comes from. You know, there's been different reports. Raymond's half-brother, Denard Burton, from what I understand, has told some kind of certain stories of his opinion of where it comes from, the term the Crips, whether it comes from the Cribs or the idea of people being like cripples. Is that something that you can speak on as far as where that comes from, or what your opinion would be on the history of the name the Crips?
Well, I can give you my opinion, and I also can show you the tape that I have of the guy that got into it with Raymond. We're from the West Side. We never, I told you Raymond and Tookie didn't know each other. So you thinking they gonna come? Nah. The West Side, we've always been Crips. We carrying canes and stuff like that. Now, my interpretation, the Crips were never even known. Tell the Ballou murder, like I said publicly, and if they would have still had the newspapers and the archives, you'd have seen that when they first started describing Crips in the newspaper, they announced them as the crippling gang because they dressed like a bunch of cripples, is how it was described. They carried canes, they wore gloves, and they looked to be cripples with their cane. To me, it was shortened to Crip, Raymond and them. But we've never, when Raymond and them were over there, they were Crips, C-R-I-B-B. Now you'll hear a million interpretations, but really at the end of the day, what difference it makes? So it's a hypothetical question, whether they did it or not. It don't even really matter to me or nobody else unless you just want to be king of the third island. Yeah. And that can happen.
So were you ever in touch with an individual named Craig Craddock? What was your knowledge of him and where he kind of fit into the early days of the organization?
Well, Craig Craddock was off the east side with Raymond Washington. In fact, I know some of his relatives that I talked to, but I'm from the west side. And Craig Craddock and them were instrumental with the forge and everything else, but it's no big U's and little I's to us. And he just was a part of it. Like we go over to Fremont, my other partner, O'Neal Brown, all of them went to jail. And Craig Craddock tried to get my partner, when we were 15, to take a gun case. So Craig Craddock is very influential, as well as Raymond Washington and a whole lot of other ones. And we get this who did what first, and it really wasn't even thought about. It wasn't like, oh, that's Tookie, that's Raymond, and it wasn't like Raymond them or anybody else gonna tell nobody else what to do. It wasn't no glorification. It wasn't no Mount Rushmore. It wasn't no you do this. It wasn't no getting jumped in. You're not gonna tell nobody. They would have killed you. They would have killed you. They would have killed you. Ask Valerie Briscoe Hooks who Howard Morrison is. That was my little friend in the 9th grade. Got killed before he was in the 10th grade, but he killed that track star brother running track. They wasn't there. I was. Or ask Sal Mineo, the actor, about Ray Williams, my friend. Killed him. I can name a lot of them if I wanted to. Bill Cosby. Most of them are affiliated to Rolex Bandit. So once again, I don't like to be comparing these and that because they look for an excuse to come take your win.
Yeah.
Oh, he said this, particularly with the internet and stuff. Yeah. So I just keep it. All of them played a role, none no bigger because they didn't go do 32 years in prison. They didn't go fight this fight. They ain't on parole like I am for 3 counts of attempted murder right now on the police while I'm doing party show.
Yeah.
And that's because I ain't had no choice. I've only defended myself. In all situations, when you signed up for this shit, these rappers, you'll hear them brag about killing somebody, then when they get their killed, they crying. That ain't how the game go. Yeah. And you're getting rapping mixed up with the streets. The streets ain't hanging around hugging no rats. Hugging no rats, no snitching, and all that internet gang banging, recording crime, bragging about crime. And you never been arrested for what you're talking about. And I'm around guys that have been convicted murderers and everything else, and they don't even do no talking like you doing. But it's for sound bites and likes. And then when it's guys and other people out here that's trying to give back to the community and their history, they want to try to, it don't go like that, young player. It don't go like that.
I think you touched on something really interesting there with, you have a lot of musicians, claiming the Crips as, fashion. It's almost a problem for some people.
Basically credibility.
Yes.
It gives you street cred.
Yes.
Athletes, rappers, why do all of them have to claim a hood? So they can be street.
Well, something I wanted to ask you about was, gangster rap kind of first emerged around, people would say the mid-'80s. Los Angeles is really the home of gangster rap. You had people like Ice-T, NWA. They really were some of the first artists to really showcase what was going on the streets in music. What was the atmosphere amongst people that were actually, associated with the Crips? As far as the music that was coming out, telling the world about what was going on the streets, how did you guys react to that?
Nah, well, they were emulating us. They dressed like us, they looked like us, and on the west side, rap started with gangbanging and drug dealings and stuff, that image and stuff like that, so it really wasn't no problem because Eazy-E was, most of them were from the streets. Ice-T, they stayed in the community, they were young. Now you got generations of rappers that family members might have had money and they never really lived that life, or if they did, they came in to where they could get money. So back then in the 80s, I was there when DOC had his car wreck and hurt his neck, Melly Mel, African and Bambaataa. We embraced the music. The music was a representation of what was going on the streets. They didn't get up there and try to be a rapper and a gang member. See, Eazy-E was affiliated, that's a gang member. But they didn't get up there talking about, I'm the killer, or I'm this and that. They would depict it in a different way to where they would be telling like the police and stuff for this matter. So they didn't have no animosity as far as how it was depicted in the Crips and Bloods, because it was an actual depiction. They dressed like us, they looked like us, But we also didn't like it because as we got older, we all in the same gang with Michael Conception, where we had Ice-T, MC Hammer, Tone Loc, Young MC, Michelet, Dr. Dre made the beat, Jewel, Digital Underground, Above the Law, Trey 57. We addressed the issue back then. No more different than they're talking about the depiction. We been did that with We All in the Same Gang. Then you had KRS-One, Nothing But Self-Destruction, had come out, and you had Public Enemy. Had also came out earlier than that, but during that time, we had made a video, We All in the Same Gang. So by the end, we knew that the images and stuff was being exploited, even back then. So now it's a revitalization of what I call black exploitation.
I feel like now, in the decades that have followed, it's gotten really out of control to the point where you've got nobodies popping out with a blue bandana in their music, and suddenly they're the biggest Crip ever. You know, how does that make you feel as far as just really the desperation of people to claim Crip for attention?
Well, they really going, you know, sound bites for like on the internet. That gives you the street cred. It's like having a credit card number that's a black card when you say certain names, that whatever it is, agorism or whatever y'all call it. But what, you know, it is what it is. We were young at one time, and you do what you do. If that, because a lot of them are actually living that life, certain ones that I see that I know. But why do you have to try to talk down on the next person? And if you do got a platform where it was built over running your mouth, talking negative and all this, now why don't you stop that and now do something positive with the people that are following you or viewing you? And more likely than not, they can't do nothing positive. They don't run and ran their mouth to where when you get down to it, you'll hear them talking. But let's see what you're actually doing to give back to the community. And a lot of them ain't.
Yeah.
So if you can't feed them, I doubt if you could lead them. So I don't knock them, I understand it, but don't get mad when we go to talking, because we get shot at just like you. If I'm staying in the same area, they ain't got no name that say, oh, that's Melvin Farmer, we don't shoot him. That don't go like that. I'm up under the same conditions. And then these younger generations want to act like you forced them to do it or that you don't matter. We try to avoid that, and they should be respectful. You got guys that are coming out from doing 30, 25, women too, men, women, and children, and then they don't spend their time in here for something you ain't never been to jail for, where they really went and paid their dues. Now they got to come out to this type of adverse conditions. It shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that. It's a system to where, hey, they coming out to fail, to return, recidivism. You, to clean this stuff up, man, you got to let all slates be clean. Come together for something where it should be positive. Because you damn sure ain't, nobody on the internet is leading no Crips. I don't give a damn who you name. Who you name, oh, he the face. He ain't the face of it, he ain't walking the walk here in LA. He might be the face on that internet, but he definitely ain't got no input as far as influence in this town. He gotta say so. But like I say, that separate the Crips and the Blood. There's no universal leader, no structure. So the older ones try to get the wisdom, and we just sit back and watch the show. It's the younger ones that have to make the decision on what you're gonna do. Like, they don't understand the power of unity. You can go vote. Get who you want in office. Oh, now that y'all not gangbanging, why y'all being tried as adults now? For a murder that might be an isolated incident. Oh, why is it you still getting 10, 20 years for having a tattoo since you ain't gangbanging? That law needs, see, they can use that as a bargaining chip. Around here, to change laws. Why would you have a gang enhancement if we already said we're not fighting each other? That gotta go. See how they go? But they're not thinking that far. You got to have a plan, not a promise. So then you got to think about it. Juvenile justice system, parks, recreation, and the school system. Those are the three breeding grounds to get the youth to where they start getting into the game. The parks, juvenile hall, and the schools. And that's where you have to start putting a focus on making it a safe haven, what we call safe passage. Most states have safe passages, and that's what we're trying to create. Safe passages, not only just for the youth, for the elderly. They get abused. You got kids that can't trick or treat because of gunfire, where in my community they ain't went trick or treating in 10 years. Don't come out for Christmas. That ain't cool. So they need to do something that let these kids and the people that aren't involved in this don't be segregating them and treating them like you a slave owner. I don't like that where we talking about other people in our backyard ain't clean.
Totally understand. Something you touched on a couple of times in the interview is just how much things have changed over the years as far as the new generation today that are involved in Cripping essentially. And you said earlier it's like when you started, people didn't necessarily get jumped into the gang. There weren't necessarily initiations the way maybe they are today. I've heard stories of initiations where young guys are sent to shoot people.
Oh, that was an era. It wasn't from our era.
Yeah.
When you came in our era, you came in knowing what to do. Then you get them as they get older, and it got bigger. Now you got them passing down the line. Where I done been to where you tell them, hey, and you know that's how they go. You got 50 years of this going on. So all that's been done and tried before, but we didn't.
Yeah.
And that's what we ain't asked nobody ever during our era to get involved, period. And now you try to blame it on the OGs, which ain't everybody OG. See, they changed that. OG, when it first started, stood for Original Crip. That's it. Now it stands for Original Gangster. And that'll make people think, oh, they were there at the beginning. Oh, that solidified him. So I don't even like the term OG because it stigmatizes and put a devalue on you. What do OG mean? You can ask 1 million people. You'll get 1 million different answers. So I don't like that terminology. And like I said, it is what it is. I know what it is to be young. I know what it is to be in this game. I know what eras, what you're doing. But when you 40, 50, and still talking about you gangbanging, you must have started at or late in the game. Or wasn't a nobody if you want to be a somebody, if that's what you want to brag about, being a gang member and having 60 arrests, 32 years. I don't know about bragging about that. I'd rather had heard I played basketball, which I could. I went to school, I own a house, I got all this from hard work. So I'm not gonna sit up here and make you think it's glorious and it's a badge of honor, because that was some of the stupidest shit I ever did. To waste my life, to where I hurt my mother, my father, my family, the community. It ain't nothing cool about that.
One of the things I wanted to ask, obviously the Crips have evolved a lot over the years, a lot of different sets and groups have formed. One of these groups that is talked about quite a lot is kind of H-Ray Gangster Crips. Can you tell me a little bit about your knowledge of how that part of the organization kind of emerged and kind of how they fit into kind of the wider community of Crips?
Well, as I told you, it's West Side, East Side, Compton, Watts. Everybody from that seed, now we branch it off. I helped found Gangster Crip, me, Frog, and that was the group of us that were already West Side Crips. Now we're staying on 83rd and Western. Now Tookie left the West Side Crips. Now we're starting the individual. Block, 111, Watergate, Underground, Payback, Raymond, Hoovers, East Side, Kitchens, Main Streets, East Coasters, Front Hoods, Compton, CCOs, Watts, Jordan. But on the West Side, now we founded Gangster Crip. I went and wrote on the wall, Gangster Crip. Wasn't a big group. When we were the West Side Crip, you might have not had over 100 members at the beginning, and it started expanding. And the Gangster Crips went from Gangster Crip, then a Trey Gangster Crip. In fact, you had a 4-7 Gangster Crips that were over there off Vermont, which is 03 Greto's father, which was Michael Jackson. 03 Greto, the rapper, that's my little nephew.
Really?
Yeah, his mother, Lisa Jackson, Michael Jackson, Melissa, and Jason, and Mikey. His daddy was original West Side Crip, as well as founding member A. Trey. And from there, that was in 72. We 15 now. Then a murder happened at a school campus where me, Frog, a murder of a rival gang member happened on that. And that solidified that we here already, but they already had no prior to that. 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, before that murder, what we were about from back then. And it just kept expanding in the next group, Monster Cody, and on so forth and so forth, Lil Sody, lot of violence, then the Rolling 60s, and everything else. So the A-Trays always been one of the originals, but we never were known for going to start things. We usually was attacked in that area, and then we retaliate them. We joined forces back then with the Hoovers. That was an alliance, and also with the Rolling 60s before that breakup in 1979, 80. Then that's when you got the umbrellas, the N-Hoods, the Nipsey Hussles, then you got the Monster Codys, and pretty much all the gangs of Los Angeles is aligned with either or. So that's the difference with Gangster Crips as opposed to N-Hood. You either with us or against us.
So I've just got a couple more questions. This one's a bit more broad. You've been prominent through so many different eras of this culture. Where do you feel that, you know, the identity of the Crips are today, considering how much it's changed, and what kind of advice would you give to a young person maybe growing up in a Crip affiliated area as far as, you know, avoiding the streets or avoiding the negative sides of the culture, or how things have changed? You know, where do you see things are today compared to where they used to be, and how would you advise someone to navigate this sort of changed world?
Well, I see gangs today, as well as the music industry, it's being exploited. I don't think there's no, there are authenticities in the rap game and the culture, but I think I don't want to say watered down. It's just not and I don't see no purpose. I don't see no cause in being a gang member where you just talking about killing, fighting each other, robbing, slandering, dressing like hoes, homeless hoes, penniless pimps. And I'm not gonna knock them, like I say, but I look at it that this generation is fueled through drugs, sex, rock and roll, hip hop, NIL. They got it easy. They got a million ways to make money. And I think they look down on others that might be older than them. I think they disrespectful. I don't think they had the codes, the morals, or the principles of what we had back in the day. But like I say, that's their era. So I think that's one of the things. But as far as what I would tell the youth today, it's hard to turn your back when it's peer pressure and you got so many avenues. But at the end of the day, if I had to do it again, I would always listen to my mother. My mother, a mother, she gonna be there when you think your homies gonna be there when you go to jail. That ain't happening. That's not happening. And if you fool around and God forbid get a life sentence, which I done had twice by the grace of God, and I'm here, you don't holler out, old homeboy, old mama. When your ass know you can die in prison, you just say, oh God. And I never read the Bible in my life, but oh God, give me one more chance. And a lot of times you think you're only hurting yourself, but I promise you, as you get older, if you make it, you ain't gonna wanna look your mother in the eye and see the wrinkles and see the pain, and your mama look at you and say, you could have been with me and you went and did that. Then a lot of guys I know, 35, 40 years old, 40 years in prison, and they number one regret, we dragged our mother through the mud. They don't like that. So a lot of times these guys get out and they want to make amends to make their mother proud. Don't get in the way of these dudes that are trying to do that. A lot of them. And a lot of people think recidivism, because you caught a murder, usually somebody that committed a murder, usually it's in the act of passion. That's the first thing. And 99.9% of the time, they never go back to jail. But when you're a robber, jack, or a drug dealer, you're gonna continuously go back and forth to jail. So at the end of the day, you don't wanna end up like the predicament I'm in and other ones, where you're too old to work, too young for Social Security, and you stuck, particularly in this state, to where when you got a record, a prior arrest record, you can't go get an apartment. They do background checks. You barely sell them, you can't get a job, you stuck. So if I'd have knew what I did then, I'd have been done went from a tax burden, where the taxpayers took care of me my whole life, to where I finally worked for an honest dollar. And I've had a lot of money in my life. Blew it. Fast money, come and go, asset forfeiture. So at the end of the day, just try to do something to help your fellow human being. Go without blinders to where it ain't no color line, and just treat people the way you want to be treated. And try to do something to give back. That's all I can tell you. Get your job. Get your education.
That's an amazing positive message to end on. So grateful for this conversation. Just for the final words, you know, I know that you're an accomplished author, you've got other documentaries you're working on. Do you want to just let the people know, you know, other things that they can look out for, that they should get your book, they should check out other things you're working on? You know, just let the people know that what you're working on and what you want them to follow up and look into once they've seen this piece.
Well, you know, I'm bored off of Instagram. A lot of things I'm shadowed, and they really keep me at low maintenance on these podcasts. But we have a movie coming out with Terry Schwab, Churchill, Terry Carney, and Ice-T, executive producer. That's called Stop the Violence World Epidemic. We think that's gonna be big. Also, I'm a scout with I Support Sports, to where we do NBA, WNBA, FIBA, NIL deals in dealing with basketball. If you think you got the talent, we do OTE, we doing semi-pro, we doing a lot of things, so we're into basketball. In fact, DJ Mustard is part of this sports organization. We got Save the Black Village, that's SBV, to where I'm on the board and with this panel to where we're providing shelter, fostering for foster children, where we're reuniting. We got parents classes, we got a curricula. I'm with Credible Messenger, where we do restorative justice as well as redefining the community. That's in New York. Gloves Up, Guns Down. We with it. These are organizations that are major 501(c)(3)s, or organizations that are doing things all across the nation that I'm a part of. As far as giving, we have the book, The New Slave Ship, 3 Strikes You're In, You're Not Out, that I wrote. Also, we're writing an initiative to try to come back to California 3 strikes law, to where we feel other ones are still locked up unjustly. We're helping the homeless, mental health. We're providing housing, feeding, and things of this nature. And that's pretty much what I got going on.
I appreciate it. It's a lot of positive stuff. Thank you again for sitting down with me. It's been an amazing conversation, and just really grateful for this time. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
There you go.
We cut
Good
there?
enough.
Amazing. That was amazing. Thank you.